What if a band's biggest hit was built on a lie? The man who helped shape the sound that sold 70 million albums ended up with none of the rewards. A label demanded they record classical music, but they invented progressive rock instead. One member refused to tour and triggered a lawsuit that destroyed a brotherhood. The Mellotron sound that defined them vanished when its creator was frozen out by the men he'd made rich. This is the Moody Blues, legends forged, then fractured from within. Birmingham, England, 1964. The British invasion was exploding across the Atlantic, and 5 young musicians believed they had what it took to ride that wave. Mike Pinder on keyboards, Ray Thomas on flute and vocals, Graham Edge on drums, Denny Lane on guitar and vocals, and Clint Warwick on bass. They called themselves the Moody Blues, and they were hungry. They weren't trying to reinvent rock and roll. They were plain and simple, following the blueprint laid down by countless others in the Birmingham scene. Cover songs, tight rhythms, enough energy to fill a club on a Saturday night. But lightning struck early. Their second release, a cover of Bessie Banks's song Go Now, entered the UK charts in December 1964. By January 28, 1965, it had climbed all the way to number 1. For 5 working-class kids from Birmingham, this was the dream realized. The Moody Blues tried desperately to follow up their breakthrough hit, but nothing connected. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. By 1966, the dream was dying. Denny Lane and Clint Warwick, 2 of the founding members, had seen enough. They walked away, leaving the remaining 3 members, Pinder, Thomas, and Edge, staring at a mountain of debt and a future that looked increasingly bleak. The Moody Blues were effectively bankrupt, both financially and creatively, but they weren't ready to surrender. They needed new blood. They needed a new direction. They needed something radical. Enter Justin Hayward and John Lodge. Hayward was a 20-year-old guitarist and singer-songwriter with connections to the British blues scene. Lodge was a bassist with the chops and presence the band desperately needed. These weren't just replacements, they were a complete reinvention. Hayward brought something the original lineup had lacked. Original material that pointed toward a future the band hadn't even imagined. His progressive track, Fly Me High, signaled immediately that this wasn't going to be another R&B cover band. This was something new, something experimental, something that might just save them. The transition wasn't just a change in personnel, it was a fundamental identity crisis resolved by sheer desperation. The Moody Blues had failed as an R&B band. They owed their label thousands of pounds. Their contract was about to expire. They had nothing left to lose, which meant they had everything to gain by taking a risk no established band would ever consider. They were searching for a sound, and they were about to find it in the most unlikely way imaginable. Decca Records had a problem. They'd invested heavily in the Moody Blues, and the band owed them advances at a time when their R&B phase had clearly run its course. At the same time, the label wanted a showpiece for something that would fuse pop and orchestral music into a stereo spectacular. The plan that emerged has become part of band legend. According to accounts from Justin Hayward and others, Decca wanted the group and arranger, Peter Knight, to tackle Antonin Dvořák's New World Symphony, alongside rock and roll material, creating a hybrid demonstration of old and new. The band agreed in principle, but then quietly decided to do something very different once they had the studio booked. Instead of faithfully reworking Dvořák, they used the sessions to build a completely original concept, a journey through a single day in human consciousness, from morning to night. Knight and the London Festival Orchestra, really a studio orchestra assembled for the project, wove symphonic interludes between the band's songs, turning what was supposed to be a demonstration record into a seamless, dreamlike narrative. The result? Days of Future Past, released on November 17, 1967, was unlike anything else in rock. Its revolution wasn't only conceptual, it was sonic. Mike Pinder had brought in a strange, temperamental keyboard called the Mellotron, which used strips of tape to trigger pre-recorded strings, choirs, and other orchestral sounds. In his hands, it gave 5 musicians the power to sound like a full symphony without hiring one every night. I'm just beginning to see. Those swelling Mellotron strings and ghostly choirs became the band's calling card, and producer Tony Clark learned exactly how to frame them on tape. He became so central to their studio identity that fans and band members alike later referred to him as the sixth Moody. Amid all this experimentation, Justin Hayward brought in a song he'd written at a crossroads in his personal life, Nights in White Satin. Written when he was barely out of his teens, it channeled heartbreak and uncertainty into a melody and lyric that felt timeless. When Nights in White Satin first came out as a single in November 1967, it barely made a ripple in America, stalling just below the Hot 100. And the album itself only reached the middle of the UK charts. The Moody Blues had created a masterpiece, and for a while, it seemed like almost no one was listening. What changed was radio culture. As FM stations emerged and embraced longer tracks and complete album sides, Days of Future Past became a cult favorite for late-night DJs. Instead of hearing one short single between commercials, listeners encountered whole suites of music in the dark, through headphones, treating rock records as private, immersive experiences rather than background noise. 5 years later, in 1972, Nights in White Satin was reissued in the United States. This time, it caught fire, rising to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, and dragging the album up the charts with it. The slow burn had become a full blaze. Yet, inside the band, the credit line on that single created a quiet fault line. Hayward's sole authorship of their signature song meant a disproportionate share of publishing income flowed his way, while Pinder, whose Mellotron and arranging choices defined the record's sound, earned far less from it. No one could have known it then, but the song that finally made them legends was also creating a financial imbalance that would haunt their relationships for decades. The validation of Days of Future Past didn't just save the Moody Blues, it launched them into one of the most extraordinary creative runs in rock history. For 5 consecutive years, from 1967 to 1972, they produced what would become known as the Classic 7 albums. In Search of the Lost, Chord explored Eastern mysticism and the search for meaning. On the Threshold of a Dream delved into the nature of reality itself. To Our Children's Children's Children was inspired by the moon landing and humanity's place in the cosmos. A Question of Balance stripped back some of the complexity while maintaining their ambition. Every Good Boy Deserves Favor reached number 2 on the US charts, and Seventh Sojourn, released in November 1972, hit number 1. The American market embraced them in a way their home country never quite did. As bassist John Lodge once reflected, "I don't know why we got on better in America than we did at home." But the answer was obvious to anyone paying attention. American FM radio was hungry for exactly what the Moody Blues were offering: complex, thoughtful, spiritually ambitious rock music that treated listeners as intelligent adults capable of engaging with difficult ideas. The song, Question, released in 1970, captured something profound about that era. Justin Hayward wrote it after repeatedly encountering young men their age at airports and bus stations, men returning home from Vietnam. The philosophical lyrics that might have seemed abstract were actually deeply rooted in the anxiety and political turmoil of the moment. By the end of the Classic 7 run, the Moody Blues had sold an estimated 70 million albums worldwide. They'd secured 18 platinum and gold LPs. They were one of the biggest bands on the planet. But the cost of that success was incalculable. The creative well was running dry. The brotherhood that had been forged in desperation and sustained through collaboration was beginning to crack under the weight of relentless pressure. By the time Seventh Sojourn came out in 1972, the Moody Blues were running on fumes. Years of writing dense conceptual albums while touring heavily, especially in the United States, left them exhausted and frayed. In 1974, they stepped away, announcing a hiatus that was meant to restore their energy and perspective. The members scattered into solo projects and side collaborations, but the hope was always that they would eventually regroup. When they did reconvene to make Octave in the late 1970s, it quickly became obvious that time apart hadn't solved their deeper problems. Sessions were moved after a studio fire, tensions simmered, and the atmosphere around the band felt very different from their classic period. The breaking point centered on Mike Pinder, the philosophical anchor and Mellotron master, whose sound had defined their 1967 to 1972 run. He participated in the Octave sessions, but citing his young family and a reluctance to re-enter the grinding tour cycle, he told the others he did not want to go back on the road. Faced with a choice between reshaping their live act around a part-time Pinder or replacing him outright, the remaining members chose to move forward without him. Former Yes keyboardist Patrick Moraz was brought in for the Octave tour, giving the group a more modern, synthesizer-driven sound that could translate on big stages without relying on the notoriously temperamental Mellotron. What followed pulled long-standing resentments into the open. Pinder, along with longtime producer Tony Clark, became involved in legal action that challenged the band's right to use the Moody Blues name without their participation. From their perspective, as founding creative forces behind the group's classic work, the name and legacy were inseparable from their contributions. The remaining members rejected that argument, insisting Pinder had made it clear he was leaving and that they were entitled to continue. The case went to court, but the judgment ultimately favored the touring lineup led by Justin Hayward and John Lodge, who retained formal control of the name. Underneath the legal fight lay the same financial imbalance that had started back in the days of Future Past era. Hayward and Lodge, as the main credited songwriters on many of the band's biggest hits, had seen far larger publishing income than Pinder, whose crucial sonic and arranging role rarely translated into shared writing credit. The irony was brutal. The Mellotron textures and atmospheric arrangements that had made the Moody Blues classic albums instantly recognizable were now largely in the hands of lawyers and history books, rather than their original creator. Within the group, what had once been a brotherhood built on shared struggle and mutual trust was increasingly a business partnership shaped by contracts, percentages, and divergent priorities. Ray Thomas remained officially in the band, but friends and observers later described him as gradually pulling back emotionally, as the easy unity of the Classic 7 era slipped further into the past. The group that had once made records about unity, consciousness, and the search for meaning now found itself living out a more painful lesson. Success can amplify small cracks into unbridgeable divides, especially when money, authorship, and identity are bound together. Most bands that lose their founding members and signature sound fade into obscurity or become nostalgia, acts playing the hits to diminishing crowds. The Moody Blues defied that trajectory in the most unexpected way. With Patrick Moraz on keyboards, they fundamentally reinvented their sound for the 1980s. Gone were the conceptual progressive rock albums and the Mellotron-driven symphonic arrangements. In their place was a glossier, more accessible synth-pop style that embraced the commercial radio landscape of the MTV era. The gamble paid off spectacularly. Long Distance Voyager, released in 1981, became their second U.S. #1 album. The songwriting partnership of Hayward and Lodge proved remarkably resilient, capable of adapting to changing musical trends without completely abandoning what had made them special. In 1986, Your Wildest Dreams reached #9 on the Billboard Hot 100. The video, featuring a nostalgic narrative about lost love and aging, received heavy rotation on MTV. 2 years later, I Know You're Out There Somewhere peaked at #30. For Justin Hayward and John Lodge, this vindicated their decision to continue without Mike Pinder. They'd proven the band could evolve, could remain commercially relevant, could find new audiences while satisfying longtime fans. But the brotherhood was never restored. The wounds never healed. Ray Thomas, who had been there from the very beginning, retired from touring in December 2002. He'd planned to step away since age 55, and at 61, he finally did. He passed away on January 4th, 2018, never having reconciled the fractured relationships that had defined the band's later years. Graham Edge, the last member of the original 1964 lineup, retired in 2018 and died in November 2021. The band officially ceased operations that same year. Then came the final losses. Mike Pinder in April 2024. John Lodge followed in October 2025. The brotherhood that had created 70 million albums worth of music, that had pioneered progressive rock and influenced generations of musicians, was reduced to a single survivor. the final chapter of the Moody Blues is defined not by lawsuits or creative disputes, but by the enduring emotional power of the music they created together. In 2018, they were inducted into the Hall of Fame, an honor many believed was long overdue. The ceremony succeeded in bringing together the surviving members of the original lineup. For one night, the wounds were set aside. The legal battles, the financial disputes, the decades of silence, all of it was temporarily forgotten in service of celebrating what they had built together. During his acceptance speech, Justin Hayward thanked John, Mike, Ray, and Graham for what he called a wonderful partnership, and admitted he could be a 19-year-old jerk pushing to get his songs recorded. A small human acknowledgement of the ego and affection that had always coexisted in the band. The legacy endures because the classic 7 albums function as a permanent cultural time capsule. That unique sound, built around Mike Pinder's Mellotron, captured by Tony Clark's production, expressed through Hayward's melodies and the harmonies of all 5 voices, can never be recreated. With the passing of the original masters, with the retirement of the sound that defined them, this particular sonic experience truly is a sound that will never come again. The men who created that magic are gone. The brotherhood that made it possible was fractured from within by the very success it achieved. And there's something profoundly human in that tragedy. Something that speaks to everyone who's watched friendships dissolve, partnerships collapse, and dreams transform into something unrecognizable. The Moody Blues proved that you can sell 70 million albums, pioneer an entire genre, and influence generations of musicians. But you can't escape the fundamental truth that success changes everything. And sometimes the price of achieving your dreams is losing the very people who made those dreams possible. The Moody Blues created a sound that defined a generation's interior life. The music for late nights, long drives, and searching for meaning in chaos. But the brotherhood that made it possible couldn't survive the weight of its own success. The financial imbalances, creative exhaustion, and competing visions fractured them from within. What remains is the music, eternal, irreplaceable, and achingly beautiful, a testament to what 5 men built together, and what they lost along the way. What's your memory of the Moody Blues? Drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories of rock's greatest triumphs and tragedies.